Welcome to the Conscious Pivot Podcast with international speaker, business mentor, best-selling author of Pivot, and your host, Adam Markell. The Conscious Pivot shares the stories and wisdom of people who have successfully reinvented some area of their business and personal life. You'll gain powerful insights into how you can fully embrace new opportunities, increase your performance, and master the art and science of innovation and resilience. So please join Adam as he guides you on your conscious pivot.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Conscious Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Markell, and it's a beautiful day here today. I'm feeling really grateful, actually. It's the day after our son turned 21. It's kind of a trippy thing to have a kid who's 21, and he's the third, so he's not even the oldest of our babies, but he's the only boy in our family, only son we have, and something about getting to 21 and what that means, and rite of passage, things like that. But so we celebrated with him last night. He's not much of a drinker. That's a good thing, but we took him out and had a lot of fun. And I'm just sitting here feeling really grateful for that. Grateful to have a healthy family, healthy kids, and to feel really healthy and alive in this moment myself. I hope you're feeling the same way. And if there's anybody that is on your end struggling in some way with health issues, then of course our thoughts go out to whoever that is and send them a lot of love, and that they feel more well soon. I feel blessed as well that I have a great guest on my show today, and really excited for the conversation. I think you guys are going to really dig this guy. And his name is Whitney Vosburgh, and he is the co-author of Work the Future Today. He's a speaker and brand consultant who brings purpose to life and puts it to work. Whitney loves doing it all. He is an interim Fortune 50 chief marketing officer, graduate of the Graduate Theological Union, and an internationally exhibited fine artist who has lived all over the world. He's got a brand new book, actually, with that similar title to that, which we're going to talk about on his during the show today, and get his perspective on purpose and on changes in life at different times of life. I think that's I get a sense of that's going to be a theme that's running through his book. So Whitney, it's great to have you on the show today. I want to make sure that I did pronounce your last name correctly, because I didn't.
You did, Adam, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. Hey, I'd love to know if there's something that's not a part of that bio that you would love in this moment for people to know about you as we get started.
Well, one of the more interesting things I did was, over the course of 4 years, I walked a 1,000-year-old, 1,000-mile pilgrimage on foot from temple to temple in remote rural Japan. And it's one of the best things I ever did, because I was literally moving at the speed of life. Gave me a chance to contemplate what I'd done with my life, what I was doing, what I would like to do with the rest of my life.
Whitney, when was this? When was that?
This was 2009 to 2012.
Wow. What was the catalyst, or the sort of the pivotal moment because this show's about pivots. So that sounds like a pretty significant pivot in your life.
My family made a big pivot in that my dad worked for Pan American Airways, and we were back in the Mad Men era, a suburban family in outside New York. And my dad got an assignment to Tokyo, Japan. So, there we were, Alice's in Wonderland. Landed in downtown Tokyo in 1962, just before the Olympics. And we're all going, whoa, this is different. So I grew up all around the world. I've lived, worked, studied in different continents all throughout my life. But there was always something about that 1 year in Japan that was pivotal.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to go back, not as a tourist or a visitor. I wanted to go back as a guest, a member of a community. So I went back 40 plus years as a guest of a artist residency in the middle of nowhere. And I saw these people walking around in these pointing hats, all white, old-fashioned gear with a staff and bells. And I thought, wow, I never seen anything like that before. So I made inquiries, and apparently there's this island Shikoku, which is roughly a circle. This 1,000-year-old, 1,000-mile pilgrimage follows the perimeter, except for the first province where I was staying, and this town was near in the center. So it goes, starts along the coast, comes inwards, and then goes out towards the coast, and then more or less stays there. And I just thought, I want to try that.
Mm.
And so I went back. My residency was 2004, so I went back 2005, 6, 8 to prepare. And then I would walk. Shi stands for 4 in Japanese. Koku is rice producing province. So I did one province each year in a different season. And so I had a backpack, and I would walk with a sound recorder and a camera to record my experiences in between the 88 temples.
That is fascinating. It's uncanny and more than uncanny, I think, too. I just got back from Tokyo, so part of what I'm getting myself back on time zone. Although this is one of those magical trips where I did sort of an around the world in 8 days kind of thing, jaunt, and I feel my body has held up really well. I don't feel any real jet lag, although I had a little trouble sleeping in the last couple of days, but for the most part, feel great. And I loved Tokyo. So I was there, had been hired by the Daimler Group, the Mercedes folks, and their division out of Tokyo that's mostly for their trucks and their Mitsubishi stuff. And I was there to do what's called a FUSO talk, FUSO talk, kind of like a TED talk, but for their internal management team. Right. And it was really, was wonderful because I got to go a couple of days early and really spend quite a bit of time in the city, have some incredible days out exploring and dinners. And I would just say, and even found for myself a great way to create, my own method for resilience in many ways is about doing certain rituals, things that I do on a ritual basis, including swimming. And so I found some indoor pools. It was kind of funny because there were tons of pools when I did the research, but most of them had closed at the end of September, Olympic size, beautiful pools. And some of them that were indoor, but still somehow closed, as though the season for swimming ended, after the summer. And it's, the Japanese, they have just like every culture has their specific ways of doing things. I think one of those things about Japanese culture is that they are very, and why I was brought in was because they are sometimes resistant to change. They're very much attached to what they wouldn't call the status quo, but they would call their own rituals, their own ways of doing things.
Yes.
And so that was part of the reason why they brought me in as this person to talk about that. But I'll just say, generally speaking, I absolutely loved it, and I will go back, and I can't wait to go back. I thought the people and just everything was wonderful. So it's so funny that and the first time when you landed in Japan was right on the eve of the Olympics. Well, interestingly enough, I've just gotten back, and the Olympics are going to be there again now for the first time since that time. Yeah. When you were a kid, they're going to have the Summer Olympics there this summer, 2020.
Yeah, and the 62. I was there 62, 63. So the Olympic would have been 64. Right. But 64 marked the dawn of modern Japan. They had this transition from the war and American occupation. 64 was like, okay, guys, we're modern, we're on our own, we're on the up and up, which they did, all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then they've been wobbling a bit since then. And now they sort of stabilized and will have their Olympics. So it's now a sort of a new, modern, mature Japan. And what I love about Japan is the fact that they are so traditional.
Whitney, I'm just curious. What do you make of the fact that Japan has it has struggled economically since probably the early 90s and has had some challenge there? I know that's not the topic of our podcast, but we have this in common.
Yes. Japan is the oldest country in the world in terms of its population. So what they are currently experiencing and soon will be experiencing in terms of having a disproportionate percentage of their population over the age of, whatever it is. That means that they are having more and more older people and fewer younger people. So that opens up the question of, do we bring in foreigners to take the jobs of people that are no longer Japanese?
Right.
That's been a big question for them. And then just in terms of their approach, Japan and Korea were normally the most respectful of their elders, even to this point of sort of awe. But that has crumbled. Now there is the social contract is no more. So they're having to rethink everything through centralization of government, to the use of robotics for elder care, Social Security, and the like. So whatever they are currently experiencing, we in Western Europe and in America, Canada, are soon to follow. So we have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah, this is interesting because the thread of this conversation, I think, feeds into the topic of your book, the new book. So, I mean, why not? Let's go there. Brand New Purpose. That's the title of the book. What's the subtitle?
Turning gray into great.
If you had gray. If I had hair, it would be gray for sure. Yeah. Well, when I let my beard grow out, which I'm going to be doing shortly, there's more salt in there than there is pepper for sure. So tell us about the book. And in particular, I think it's there's an interesting tie-in to this, to our conversation around Japan. And just for those of you that don't know, Tokyo has 40 million residents. It's a very large city. It's spread out. Doesn't feel crowded to me, though. I'm from New York originally, so I know what a crowded city feels like, or at least cities at times when they're crowded. I didn't feel like Tokyo was crowded, so it's pretty remarkable that 40 million people are inhabitants of that great city.
Yes, because Tokyo really is a very large combination of different villages that are bisected by huge avenues. But once you get past those avenues, you have a village atmosphere, and that's why it doesn't feel so crowded. Because I'm also from New York originally.
Yeah. So let's talk about Brand New Purpose and this idea that there is a shift that's occurring, and it may coincide with the shift in color of our of our hair. Yeah.
Because I wanted to write a book based on my experiences of midlife transition.
Yes.
And decided I wanted to do it within a graduate program. So I went to the graduate theological program here in Berkeley. Went to the Unitarian Universalist school because they were the most liberal and flexible in their beliefs. And wrote this thesis called Second Act, Creating a Meaningful Middle Age and Beyond. I was going to publish it, but then I thought, I've got a different story to tell. So I co-authored the two Work the Future Today books. But now I've come back to actually publishing the Brand New Purpose, Turning Gray into Great book in the spring, because I realized what the missing piece was. And it was recently confirmed. Time Magazine, 2019 Person of the Year, Greta Thunberg.
Right.
So there are people who are in their 60s and 70s who started a revolution back in the 60s and 70s to protest against environmental degradation and what eventually became global climate change, crisis, and the like. So the EPA was formed in the early 70s by Nixon, of all people.
Yes. He did one or two pretty decent things. Yeah.
So the 80s happened. Milton Friedman, economics from the Chicago School, in terms of more is more, profit, focus on shareholder. So we, have the shift away from, a single bottom line to a triple bottom line of profit, people, planet. Now it's planet, people, profit, because there's no planet, there's no people, there's no profit.
Right.
And so
is another way to explain that shift, sort of a shift from we to me, that there's a sort of a pendulum shift between the time, as you say, in late 60s, early 70s, when we were very focused on community solutions or collaborative solutions to world's problems, and then we shift away from that into the more me focus of the sort of 80s and 90s and that.
Yes. So we went from and communes and collectives and mass marches and the start of civil rights and fighting against all the isms except the ultimate ism, ageism.
Mm-hmm.
So we shifted from we to the me generation to Gordon Gekko in the 80s and Wall Street, greed is good, and people who got lost in their mortgages, children, careers. So now that we're sort of past that to a certain degree, we have an opportunity to complete the revolution that we started. But, and here's the really kicker, why I delayed my book by 7 or 8 years, is we can't do it alone. I was at a party this summer. It was a bunch of boomers, very well-to-do. They retired, comfortable, been there, done that, didn't have to do anything. And I said, why are you organizing very actively this radical social political movement? And they said, I don't need to do it, but I have to do it for my children and my grandchildren. They don't have the same access to what I had access to. They don't have what I have and had. Their future is radically different from what we were facing at that age. So we need to start creating a better future for them while we can. And so that was sort of like a wake-up call for me when I heard that. And it confirmed by, the Greta Thunberg as the person of the year for Time magazine. The youngest person ever in the
15?
16.
16.
Yeah. And so, she went from being a solitary protester outside the Swedish parliament with a little, drawing saying climate strike to, just over a little year, she's become, the face of the youthful, primarily global climate change strikes and movement and what have you. But as Time magazine noticed that, she, like the rest of us, rests on the shoulders of the giants who came before her.
Yes. And
so for me, we've sort of come full circle in terms of, we started this in the 60s and 70s because enough of us at that time sensed that things were not right and we got distracted. And now, if we are to make a difference, now is the time, but we can't do it alone. So the point of the Brand New Purpose turning gray into great is, yes, we need to go back to where we started to make it appropriate and relevant to today, not to back in the day, and to do it in collaboration with younger people so that we all have something to share. We can all mentor each other, young and old and young. It has to be of equals. It can't be like this, because that would be deadly, so that we can collaborate, communicate, collaborate, co-create, so that we can create a commonwealth of purpose, possibility, and plenty of prosperity.
So this was sort of a season of of a you're speaking about the baby boomer generation, which is roughly sort of 1964, 65, as a sort of an end date. So meaning that the youngest of the baby boomers were probably born no later than about 64 or 65, something
Yeah.
like that, right?
You know what?
So these folks were in their teens, or maybe even in their 20s or 30s, I suppose, when those revolutionary movements and marches and things were happening in the late 60s and 70s. And then, as you say, people got lost in the commerce of life, in their mortgages, in their kids, in the betterment of their families, and paying for it all. As we know, none of this is, there's no free lunch with regard to a lot of these things. So now they're at a stage perhaps when they've got the time and the energy still and the focus and maybe even the cushion financially to be able to refocus on this. So I'm curious, do you think, and this is more just maybe just a guess from you, but I'm curious, do you think that the current generation, what we have here as largely millennials, do you think that they, who are very much, I think, a more conscious generation, they're conscious of things that I wasn't conscious of growing up. And I sort of am on the cusp of the baby boomer, maybe that last year or so, and then more Gen X, which is sort of ill-defined or defined by apathy or I don't know what, things like that, just sort of being in the middle, I suppose. Do you think that there's a seasonality to this, to the desire, to Greta's work, for example, to her enthusiasm and her passion at age 16? Do you think there's a season for that? And then, Greta, when she's 26 or when she's 36, will now focus on family and mortgage and get lost in those more mundane aspects of life, as the baby boomers did. I'm just curious if you think this is sort of a trend, and therefore something that we might look at how it's, how we have that conversation.
It's a bit of both. Should people Greta's age have the good fortune, the good health, the good environment, the good economy, to be able to have a career, a family, a home, good health, and all that many of us, not all of us, but many of us have experienced and taken for granted, or didn't experience it, but knew that it was possible, had been exposed to it, or even exposed to the media version of it on television or in the movies or books or, comics or whatever it is. So, we face very dire possibilities from the global climate and existential crisis that we currently face. So, if things progress somewhat like they did in the past, then yes, people will forget their initial passion and focus until they get to the point where they can come back to it later on.
Yeah.
But there again, things could get progressively worse for long enough where people won't necessarily have that opportunity unless you are very lucky, very wealthy, or well situated in a part of the world where your basic needs are met outside the global capitalist society.
Yeah. I mean, complacency is an interesting thing, right? Because it can be born of comfort. It can come out of a number of different, it can be the result of a number of different things, of course, and complacency costs. I mean, if we take our eye off this ball, people were saying that in the 60s, people were saying that in the 70s. It's not really all that new that folks have been calling attention. I mean, Ralph Nader's been calling attention to issues, relative to these things for a long, long time.
Yep.
The Green Party's existed for a long time. So, yeah, I'm just, it's interesting. But your book, is your book meant to be sort of a catalyst or a call to action for this group of folks that, as you say, may have enjoyed, some good economic times and some, or just have just enjoyed, as you say, making it to this point? Is there a special call to action to those folks now to just give it back in some way, pay it back, pay it forward?
Yeah, yes, it's an invitation for a conscious pivot, so to speak.
Yeah.
To go back to where they started in the 60s and 70s. And for some, it might be in the early 80s. I mean, I remember I was born in 56, I'm 63, being in art school in New York in the early 80s, participating in anti-Reagan art shows. So, there were pockets of resistance, so to speak, to the status quo that lingered far beyond the 60s and 70s.
Right.
It went in, far beyond that. But it's really about slowing down, going inside, traveling that long distance of 18 inches from head to heart, and from heart to gut. So for our IQ, our EQ, and what I call GQ, our gut instincts, intuition, to connecting with ourselves, integrating, and then going out again from our head to our heart to our hands, from our why to our who and where to our how. What is our unique gift? Who do we share it with for maximum benefit? Where do we find them? How do we best serve? Through sharing our unique gift.
Right.
So it's taking a personal journey and then looking for an opening in the larger conversation and the world out there, amongst ourselves, our peers, but also how we might help our children or our grandchildren or our nieces and grandnieces, nephews, or just children who are live next door, or whatever it is. It's making connections where there should be, but there aren't.
Yes. So the demographic that you're targeting with this book, they've been a resilient bunch, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, this is aimed at people who are old enough to know that whatever they did in their first career either did or didn't work, was or wasn't successful, but whatever it was, no longer satisfied. So that it's to look beyond external trappings of success, whether it's the car, the house, the clothes, or membership and this or that, but to look inwards to your second act, your third act, where you become more defined. You pivot towards an internally derived and driven success. It becomes more personal, more intangible, which means it's that harder to find, but that much more satisfying because it comes from the soul.
Does that make sense to me? I'm curious if you've noticed, or as part of your book or any research you've done, whether there's an element of resilience that plays into the ability to create a second act or a third act. Because I mean, look, I'm fascinated with the topic of pivot. That's why the show's all about that. We wrote a book about that. And in that conversation, when we were writing the book, actually, we were thinking in terms of, what enabled me to create a midlife calling out of what could have been a midlife crisis. Mm-hmm. And resilience was a big part of that. That was sort of the little circle inside the big circle. And now what I realize years later, where I am in my life now, and what I've noticed of people and the research I've done, is that the big circle is actually resilience for me. And pivot is the small circle inside of that is part of my ongoing evolution and the things that I want to do with my life and the things that I want to leave and the value I want to contribute to the world, that I've got to be incredibly resilient because the world is disrupting and being disrupted on such a consistent basis. Exponentially, the change is so much greater and faster all the time. Yeah. You go, but if you're not, if again, you could look at it from so many different perspectives, but if you're not resilient in the face of that, it'll just knock you over. You won't be around or strong enough, won't have the energy to create that third act or that fourth.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that? And I'd love to know your own definition of resilience as well.
resilience is the rocket fuel. It's the passion to maintain a sense of joy, passion, enthusiasm, curiosity, lifelong learning, creation that feeds into a pivotal moment when you decide, okay, I've got my rocket fuel. The pivot determines my projection. I'm going to go this way as opposed to that way. And and they say in rocketry that just a few degrees over time can make a huge difference. So the resilience is the ability to bounce back no matter what. For me, it's probably my core personal quality that enables me to keep on bouncing back no matter what.
So do you have, rituals are very important. You and I, before we started the show, we talked about how in many ways the quality of our lives is equal to the quality of our rituals. The power in our lives is very much tied to the power of those rituals. So what rituals for resilience would you take a look back at your history and the different things you've done, the second act, third act, fourth acts that you've created, including right now this book that you've got coming out and the call to action to others just like yourself. What are some of the rituals that you've had along the way that produce resilience, do you think? That ability to get back up?
It goes from small to big.
Do you have a 10-second? Let's do you got a 10-second ritual for us? Because you're a mindset guy. I mean, right?
I when I get up in the morning and before I go to bed, I walk out in nature.
Mm-hmm. Why do you walk out in nature? What's so special about nature? And
well, it's away from devices.
Yes.
And all the digital nonsense that
shocking. Have to get away from the recording devices that are recording us all the time. Yeah.
Yep. It's getting out of a man-made environment to a more natural environment, preferably things with trees and flowers and shrubs. So it's instead of inside, it's outside. Fresher air,
clean air, yes.
Cleaner air. You're exercising. You're in movement. As everything is always in movement perpetually on this planet.
Or it's dead. Or it's dead. Things that stagnate, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you're not moving, you might not be living.
Yeah.
So it's just
everybody check yourself right now. I always check my pulse. Am I still here? Oh yeah, good. If I can only find the pulse, I can never find my own pulse.
It reminds me of that poster from the 60s or 70s where there's a person in a raincoat in front of a piece of art, and it says "Expose yourself to art."
Yeah.
Well, it's my equivalent of exposing yourself to nature.
Proximity to nature. Yeah.
Proximity, being open to it, participating in it, being part of it, being of movement, of exercise, getting away from digital devices, of being mindful of step by step, and appreciating that we are part of the natural world.
Yes.
And one small part of something much greater than us. But since we're part of something much greater, we are great in ourselves.
The miracle is certainly more on display in nature than anywhere else. For me. Yeah. So I look out at the ocean. I'm looking out right now and just looking at this sea of blue, and it just to be able to see it, or to, as you say, to walk in it, to experience it, it creates a miracle. I mean, it's the miracles are around us all the time. It's just I'm not always tuned
Yeah,
in tune enough to recognize a miracle when when it's staring me in the face.
yes. Well, we are miracles. I mean, just think
Mm.
of the human body, and life itself, and life in us. All the billions of microbes and organisms and what have you that live inside us that keep us alive.
This conversation's a miracle. I'm looking at you, right? For folks that are watching this on YouTube, or you get to see that if you're listening,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but I'm looking at you, Whitney, and you're a miracle.
Yep.
And
We
I know
all
I am. Yeah, we are. It's beautiful. I will share, as I'm apt to do, the one ritual, the sort of the 10-second miracle in my life, which is 3 steps that are 3 easy pieces. Wasn't there? What was that? Oh, it was 5 Easy Pieces was that old movie.
Mike Nichols.
Yeah, great movie, crazy movie. But these 3 easy pieces are not so easy to pull off every day.
Mm-hmm.
First piece of it is to wake up, and waking up just to be awake is a miracle all by itself, because we know not everybody has that, right? We get that cleanly. The waking that's more of a figurative sort is the consciousness, is our ability to, how open can I be today? What's the degree to which I'm open or closed on any particular day? It's like the aperture of a camera, yeah, the shutter. And that changes. It depends on sleep. For me, it depends on my own mindset. Do I start off in a pissy mood, or am I, more apt to just,
Choice.
be humble? Yeah. Choice.
What do I choose to be today?
Yeah. You think about those folks that are have more gray. We all know that when you're, as we get older, we have a few more aches and pains. We have a few more things we could, quote, complain about.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's interesting. I had gotten in the habit of watching the news a little bit in the morning, just to kind of catch a little glimpse of what was going on, because of this melodrama that's unfolding in front of us all. And I never talk politics on the show, and I won't do so now. I just say that it is, it wasn't a healthy way for me to begin the day, to start my mind in that direction, where immediately I could feel that aperture of my heart closing,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming quite agitated and judgmental and even angry. I'm a recovering New Yorker, recovering lawyer from New York. So I really had this pretty susceptible to that getting worked up quickly, kind of thing. So you can identify, you can understand that, right? Yeah. Yeah. So the first step is this waking, and second step is to feel something about waking up. What do you feel when you begin the day? Again, am I feeling a rush? Are we feeling rushed to get going and get moving, get doing something, get the coffee going, get the, find out from the phone what great messages we've missed while we were sleeping? Maybe it was a message from the Queen. Who knows, right? we could be getting, knighted or something. Anything can happen while we're sleeping. Good God. Pick up that phone and find
Sir
out.
Adam.
I could be Sir Adam. I could be a Duke. Something.
The Duke of Merkel.
The Duke of Merkel. Yeah. So I choose gratitude, and it never fails. It really is quite. You talk about a 10-second miracle or a 1-minute miracle. Just sit in gratitude for 60 seconds and see how your body feels. I know how my body feels. I know what's coursing through my veins is somehow more healthy for me.
Yeah.
But for the long term, to be in gratitude. And then the third piece, after allowing that 10 seconds to a minute just to feel grateful, is to actually use the power of words for myself to declare something out loud that and lately it's been 2 things. Folks that have heard this message before, they know that the 4 words that I've been using for better part of a dozen years now is are I love my life. Those 4 words, I love my life, it has really had massive meaning for me. And then recently I had a woman who's in her 70s on the podcast. And if you haven't heard this show, Judy Whitcraft, you got to just go back and check out that episode. It's really cool. She's just a wise, wise lady. And she said that she wakes up and she says out loud, I wonder what miracles are coming today. And I wrote it down. I've got it by my bedside. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? I wonder what miracles, we've been talking a little bit about miracles, and I wonder what miracles are coming today. So this was a miracle, Whitney. I am so thrilled and really feel blessed that our mutual friend, Teresa de Grosbois, shout out to Teresa, made that introduction, and Ben Joya is another friend of ours that we have in common, and all those beautiful people in Tokyo, Japan. We have in common. Exactly.
So this.
Arigato. Just beautiful. So happy to have you on the show today.
Pleasure.
Thanks for being with us. Everybody, we'll have full show notes. You can find out more about Whitney and his upcoming book, as well as other books that he's written. Just good stuff. So check out the show notes, leave a comment, let us know what you feel about what we've done here today. And any suggestions, we're really always so open. I mean, feedback is like oxygen for all of us. So we'll see you soon. Ciao for now, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you now have the tools and greater insights to navigate your own pivot. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at adammarkel.com/podcasts. For more tips, strategies, and support as you consciously pivot into a new business and lifestyle you love, join our Pivot community on Facebook at pivotfb.com.